So, Tracy, cybersecurity is certainly one of the hot coverages right now. What's going on in corporate America and in businesses around the world that is making this such an essential coverage?
There are a lot of factors, actually, that are affecting why businesses are starting to sit up and take notice. And it really boils down to education awareness and their knowledge now, today more than ever before, of the pervasiveness of these cyber breaches. So we've been finding that the more and more these well-known breaches are being publicized and companies are being made examples of, the more business owners are wondering, gee, could this happen to me? That compounded with the trends that we read about all the time in surveys relative to the amount of breaches that are occurring to not just large organizations, but how it's really starting to seep down into more Main Street of America is starting to take hold, and those trends are not looking pretty. Year after year, we're noticing that more and more companies are subject to a data breach. Year after year, we're noticing that companies are spending more money on remedy of those data breaches, and that's been a driving factor in why companies are starting to seek and look for alternative risk management solutions. And one of those risk management solutions is insurance to protect them from what we deem as almost the inevitable, a cyber breach.
How are the types of companies that need this coverage evolving, whether it's in terms of size or in industry category? How is the clientele changing and presumably expanding?
So we all started off thinking that financial institutions needed this insurance more than any other industry sector, and then we kind of migrated into the healthcare industry, realizing that the healthcare industry, particularly as highly regulated as it is, certainly needs more cyber insurance protection and needs to be thinking about cyber insurance policies and protection. Now I would say that nobody is immune to it. But today what we're seeing is small businesses that run a pizzeria, that run a donut shop, that run a hairdresser salon. Anyone who's collecting personally identifiable information on their customers in any way is subject to data breach exposure. Particularly if that information is financial information such as credit card information. So the whole world of retail and merchants isn't just the large retail operations and the large merchants, but the smaller retail operations as well. Truly Main Street America is how I define it. I also see the consulting professional services industry sector really exploding with growth. When you think about what a business consultant does, whether it be a human resources consultant, a payroll processing consultant, some type of business process consultant, a law firm, an accountant, these types of organizations routinely collect confidential information on their customers. They routinely store that information and hold that information in a trusted way. And that type of industry segment is also exploding with growth right now.
And for the client who hasn't had the coverage before, what are some of the first questions they ask, and how do you sort of walk them through the basics to have them understand the type of coverage that they do need?
They really start raw. They wonder, well, what is cyber breach and what does that mean to me? So they really want to understand, where are the costs that are going to affect my bottom line? And today, bottom lines are so heavily protected due to the economic downturn that we've been experiencing for many years and continue to experience. They want to know, how impactful will this be, and what does that look like from an insurance coverage perspective? So they want to understand liability first and foremost. What's my liability? What's my duty, my fiduciary duty, and my obligation to information and to keep information safe? To whom is my obligation due to? Is it due to my employees, to my customers? If you're a healthcare institution, is it to my patients? And as a result of that liability, they want to understand, well, where would the liability come from? Would it come from my customers, my patients, my employees? Would it come from a regulator? Would it come from some other type of governmental agency? And what kinds of potential liabilities will I be faced with, and the damages and the defense of those suits against me? What will that look like? And they want us to help them understand what is the probability of those types of suits and the ultimate cost. Then, and more importantly, or as importantly, they're now starting to also draw a straight line to the direct first-party portion of the loss. And this is probably the tipping point in cyber insurance marketplace that we see today, which is really risk managers now starting to understand what are those direct costs associated with a data breach. And by direct costs, we mean once a data breach occurs, you have some obligations. They might be state-specific obligations, they might be regulatory obligations, but nonetheless, you have obligations to comply with. And the compliance of those obligations is driving significant costs and affecting bottom lines of corporations.
And hackers and their techniques are constantly evolving and getting better. On the loss mitigation, loss control front, how can you work with a client to help them adapt to the changing environment and keep up with the constant dangers that are out there, the constantly evolving dangers?
That's the $6 million question. How do you apply sound risk management principles to either avoid an event entirely or to mitigate the impact of an event? Chubb has done a fine job at guiding our insureds for the past decade on how to thwart off a potential data breach. But more importantly, just recently, we've launched what we call Chubb's eRisk Hub. The hub does one of two things. One, it first helps an insured assess their security breach posture and what that might look like before you have a breach. So it's really truly loss prevention. It's the preventative measures that an insured should take in advance of a particular incident. And then what I love about the hub is that it has a post-event portion of services available for an insured. And that's where we're really finding that our insureds need a lot more help. Insureds can develop loss prevention mitigation strategies and techniques, and they're all extremely important. But they're not 100%. Data breaches happen every day. 95% of companies polled have a data breach. So obviously, loss prevention is quite helpful, quite useful, and it helps to mitigate damaging effects, but it doesn't prevent it 100%. So what we need to do is help our insureds deal with when it does happen, what do you do? And
because it is a hot coverage area, a lot of your competitors are certainly aggressively pursuing it as well. What sets Chubb apart in the marketplace for its cybersecurity coverage?
I think Chubb's claims-paying capabilities clearly outpaces our industry and sets us apart from our competitors, and that reputation has carried forward with cybersecurity since we have a dedicated claims unit that is delivering superior results as far as customer satisfaction in cyber. That dedicated claims group they all have at least 10 years of experience in management liability claims handling. So that's been one area that we've been able to demonstrate. I think our ability to bring loss control solutions to our insureds is another area that sets us apart. In addition to the loss control, loss prevention, and risk management once a breach occurs, one of the things that sets us apart beyond our ability to handle the loss and beyond our ability to provide good sound advice is the fact that we've been in this space for over 10 years. If you look at the carriers today, you'll notice that the significant growth in new competitors has been within literally the past 12 months. We were one of the first insureds to identify the notification cost exposure and to be able to come back to the industry immediately with a response for coverage. We now call it privacy notification expense. Today, it's routine for cyber insurers. But what's little known is that we were one of the first in the industry to develop that coverage to respond to a growing exposure.
How can you characterize the growth that you've seen in the cybersecurity line?
Well, we can characterize it by the volume of written premium, and we've seen over 30% growth in written premium for cyber insurance in the first 6 months of 2011. We ended in 2010 with approximately the same growth as a 30% growth in 2010. In a day and age where D&O premium is hard to grow at flat, that's a pretty explosive growth.
Any hot trends that we didn't touch on?
You know, I always wonder, did anybody ever sit back and say, is cyber insurance here to stay, or is it a fly-by-night product? And, I wonder what that answer would have been 6 years ago. I really do firmly believe and know what that answer is today, but I think that that's a change that needs to be recognized, because I think 6, 7 years ago, risk managers who weren't buying cyber insurance were probably thinking it was a fad. It was like the new Cabbage Patch Kid. Eventually that'll be replaced by some other cute little toy or device. And today, it's really difficult for a risk manager to say, it's a fad. Today, I think it's pretty much well embedded in risk management choices and decisions. And probably the only thing that holds back a company from buying insurance is really being able to budget for this particular new insurance product, and to be able to afford it, frankly. And I think that that is something that nobody's ever asked me before,